So, thank you for taking an interview with Ladywood Unite. My name is Laura, and I'm part of Ladywood Unite, just like you.
Mhm.
To confirm, Ladywood Unite does not support any political party or candidate. We want to get to know you and your views better. This interview is being recorded, and it will be posted on our website and YouTube channel, just to
Mhm.
check that that is okay with you.
Yep, sure.
Okay, fantastic. So just to start, it seems like it's been a really busy election campaign in Ladywood. How
Mhm.
are you finding it?
Yeah, it's I've done quite a few events. I'm also helping lots of other candidates and other seats as well. As you might know, parties have kind of target seats. So we have a few in the West Midlands, not Ladywood this time, unfortunately, but so I'm helping them. I'm also an agent for myself and a number of other candidates as well. So there's lots of legal things to get through. So, but yeah, so I sort of just keeping track of what's going on. We've got Alan Rock that's joined the constituency from Hodge Hill. So there's sort of lots of new people to meet there and lots of new things to listen to. Although really, I'm hearing the same thing across the whole constituency. So lack of engagement, which I'm sure we'll get on to, but basic things like can't get a doctor's appointment, can't see a dentist, too much fly tipping across the city, the state of the roads, the state of public transport. Basically, everything doesn't seem to be working as it is. And as you probably expect to hear from a Liberal Democrat, we've got the Tory government that's left our economy in a mess, and locally, Labour's bankrupt our council. So we're kind of feeling that people are they're almost feeling a bit disconnected because they know that we need to get rid of the Conservative government, but they're not really sure what a Labour government would bring. And yeah, so but lots of issues that cut right across all the communities.
Thank you. And how do you see this as different to past elections? Because you've been involved with politics for quite some
Mm.
time. Are these similar issues to previous years, or are there things that are different this time around?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, health and social care, we're the only major party talking about social care in this election, which is unfortunate. But a number of the other parties have said they're prepared to even look at our proposals because unless you fix social care, you're not going to fix the problems in the NHS. So that's always been something I've been particularly keen on. I helped write part of our manifesto. And generally in politics, I'm known for going on and on about mental health all the time in particular. So those issues have always been around. But Ladywood this time, it's been quite a hot seat for the media because you've got an independent candidate who has views that perhaps, well, I certainly don't share, but did very well in the mayoral election. So obviously came up in the media and they've been very interested in him. It's been a very safe Labour seat for a very long time. This time that feels quite different because of the challenge from the independent. So I think we've seen Shabana out an awful lot more, which is great. We need that. So yeah, it's got a lot more profile this time because it isn't. I think my personal feeling is that Shabana will probably take the seat again, but there is quite a lot more competition this time, so it's felt quite different. And I've certainly done a lot more interviews mentioning the word Ladywood than I have in previous elections.
Thank you. So, as you are well aware, Lee, the regeneration is something that we are very concerned about. And I'm so glad to chat with you about it. And because you and your party were there for us from day one, I still remember that coffee that we had in Juju's, where you and Roger really explained to me and one of my neighbors exactly what was happening to us because we had been kind of, left to figure it out for ourselves. Um, what is in the remit of an MP, do you think, to really intervene in an issue like the regeneration? I mean, how much power does an MP really have to shape what happens? And if you were to be elected, what could you do?
I think it's a fantastic question, especially for all the people watching this to help inform them, because it's not something we do enough of in sort of general civic society. I think so. So the MP has little power to kind of certainly an MP can't stop it. So that needs to be made clear. And it's the local council, the local authority, and therefore through your councillors, that the planning department obviously has the ultimate say. And that's all done in the local council. So, but what can the MP do? So the MP has certainly they can put pressure onto the council and the councillors. Now, one of the things I think would be a benefit is if, as a Liberal Democrat, I was elected, that would put some more pressure on the council and councillors because, of course, they're currently Labour. So if there's a Labour MP, Not to say that it's impossible to put pressure on, but being in the same party, there might be a certain line to take, or you don't want to upset your friends, or obviously it's a lot more close-knit within the same party. So having an MP of a different party, I think, would help shake things up. But it's also that there has to be more pressure put onto the developers to get them engaging more, or at all, may I say. The other big thing that an MP has access to, and perhaps more so than councillors, is access to a lot of the media. So whether that's print journalism, or especially around online and TV, radio, in social media, there's a lot more that the MP gets attention for than, say, a local councillor. So it's really the job of the MP to help sort of boost the voice of what you're asking for, but also the MP has kind of a, because usually if an MP wants to say something, a journalist somewhere will pick up the phone and go, yes, what would you like to say? So certainly the media should be used a lot more to shine a light on what's going on.
Thank you. That's really helpful to know and to understand. I certainly didn't realize what the role of an MP versus my local councillors versus local government was at the time the regeneration was announced. Quite a learning curve.
Yeah,
So I've got some specific questions about the regeneration, if that's okay.
sure.
One of the concerns that residents have voiced is about the negative environmental impacts of demolishing perfectly good quality properties. Where do you stand on protecting the natural environment?
That's a very strong case. Part of my current day job is around sustainability and environmental management in the transport sector. So my day job involves risk assessment around environmental impacts and so on. So I'm not an expert in housing risk assessment, to be clear, but certainly there's a lot of embodied carbon in any potential demolition work. So that's a key concern. We'd want to know in the area, and I believe Ladywood Unite has already asked the council, are there any protected areas? Are there any areas that haven't been resolved? I know in Ladywood, around the back of the arena, there's sometimes been bat sightings. So there's all sorts of things to consider. It could even be plant life that we need to look at as well to protect. One thing my party nationally is wanted to change in the planning laws is that something called biodiversity net gain should be added into the planning laws. So it sounds quite dry, but what it means, so biodiversity is obviously the all of the plants and the animals and the life that we have in sort of green spaces in and around all of our built environment. And net gain means anything that removed means that you should actually replace that and more. So we think that should be for large projects, of which the regeneration certainly is. We think that should be 100%. So anything they take out in terms of the biodiversity, we think not only should the developer replace, but that should be double the amount that they replace in the local area to actually sort of kind of try and offset the damage that they've done. And also, look, having green spaces, which is something we want in and around the area as well, benefits to physical health, mental health. You can take your dog for a walk. I do know someone who takes their cat for a walk around here. And also it helps with air quality, because the more green you have, the more carbon it soaks in. So yeah, it's a huge part of, for us as well as people, not just, how it can look.
Thank you. So speaking of the developer and what the developer is going to do, we're at a moment in the regeneration campaign where the council seems to be in the process of signing an agreement with the developer that they have selected, largely without our input. What can and would you be willing to do to support us to ensure the council do not sign the developer agreement on terms that would be disadvantageous to the community of Ladywood? We're really worried about what's in that developer agreement and what we can do to make sure that it protects our interests.
Absolutely. I mean, from day one, I think it's important to remind people as well that Ladywood Unite and other people are sort of involved in the campaign, if not directly with you. It's not that they've said no to everything. It's that they've said, as Lib Dems have asked for again in the planning law, that it's protected, which the Conservatives might want to take out if they regain power, to take out the community element. So it's not build nothing, it's build with the consent of the local community. Now, unfortunately, that does sometimes mean that the community might still lose out here, but it might gain here because the developer has to, compromise as well. I'm really concerned that on the record, the Labour government, if they happen to win, have suggested that more power needs to be given to developers because we just need to get building. Now, we do have a crisis of housing But my word, we don't resolve that by giving developers even more power than they already have, because councils are basically scared to really oppose them, because they think that if they say no to anything or challenge them at all, that they'll just end up in court and they'll lose anyway. So they just kind of give in, as in my view did our local two councillors in June last year when it was raised at cabinet. And that was really, as you said, when we first found out, and Roger Harmer, our group leader, asked the question, well, the two councillors have just waved it through with a nod. Don't you think a 20-year, £2.5 billion scheme affecting thousands of people needs a little bit more consultation? So, you know, from day one, we famously had the door shut in our face at that first meeting. So there's a lot more engagement that needs done, and that needs to be with the developer. But you know, we should be pressing the developer, as should the MP. And if elected, I'd do that. That doesn't mean we have to go in screaming and shouting, but nobody's asking for that. It means that we dare to press them and question them, get them in the room, get them around the table with everybody else, which, you know, I'll probably keep repeating, as I know it's what you've been asking. Get us around the table and we'll work with you. If we're not there, then we can't do it. But yeah, the developers have got to be dared to be asked questions, and I think that's something that doesn't happen.
And it seems like a lot of the decisions, the important decisions that are being undertaken about the regeneration are taken without us.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I own the freehold of my home. I don't live in a council built property, and I was excluded from being invited to the initial sessions back in 2019 that discussed the regeneration.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now invited to drop in sessions about the charter, but the charter, as far as I understand, doesn't necessarily dictate really what's going to happen. It's just a list of things that we've asked for. But at the same time, the council is doing this developer agreement. We're not allowed to see it. We're not allowed to input into it. If this agreement gets signed without our input, that could potentially harm us. Have you seen anything like that before? Do you think that that's
Yeah.
a fair concern?
Yeah, again, it goes back to this: what does the developer want? And it kind of starts and ends there, which is obviously the wrong position. Of course, they have to say they'll be doing the work. But I mean, I know one of the meetings, obviously one of the council officers, after being pressed for this master plan, ended up saying, and I remember the exact words, or perhaps it was wrong to call it a master plan in the first place. So this indicative plan or whatever, we know exists. Obviously, I know you guys have been doing freedom of information requests, and we know it was kind of, what was it? It started off with, yes, there is one. Then it's, we don't really want to comment. Then it's, no, there isn't one. And then it's, I think the latest is, the minute the contract is signed, we'll let you have a copy. Well, no, because that means a fait accompli. You can't sign it and say, oh, well, here it is now. Well, because then that means you haven't engaged. So they are putting on some more workshops. That seems to be, I think, pressure from yourselves and others, which is good. Are they enough? Are they going to handle enough people? Is it going to be meetings with lots of flip charts and post-it notes and marker pens? I worry. Where is that going to go? We've seen our friends over in Druids Heath have had a draft charter, haven't they, of about 16 pages long, and it's if, maybes, buts, and nothing sort of legally enforceable. So yeah, it's a deep concern that if they suddenly say, oh, we've got the contractor now, because we believe they're still not in contract when they should have been in January. But if they then say, well, they are now, after surprising us during COVID, because they gave the award, didn't they, during COVID, without telling anybody they'd even entered into discussions about finding a developer, and then St. Joseph won it by attrition because the other two pulled out. So even the process of how they got that developer is a big question. So yeah, we need to make sure that it isn't just oh, we've got them now, by the way, here's the plan, see you later. We need to keep pushing to get in earlier.
Thank you. Absolutely agreed. So, I mean, this is a lot that residents are facing, that churches are facing, that businesses are facing. We and residents report concerns about accessing independent and specialist advice. We've been promised this since very early on, but we still don't have it almost a year in. If you were elected, what could you actually do to help us secure the specialist advice that the council have promised us? People really need it now, but we haven't heard anything about, any follow through on all of these empty promises from the council and from the councillors.
Well, I believe you've got written text on your side there. I believe there is a statement, whether it was in council and in the minutes or a meeting or an email where John Cotton, the leader of the council, did promise that. So the MP's job will be to be banging on his door and reminding them of this, and until it's delivered. Because if you've promised something and there is evidence to that, then that has to be delivered. So the MP must be demanding that as the very least ask that they could give, and they must be independent as well. We must, to use a phrase, know where the money's come from. We must have a clear, transparent path to say who is paying them, how, who's setting any conditions. Again, community should be involved in that. But yeah, if my memory is right and that is down in print somewhere, then that's something the MP should be taking to John and reminding him of.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, it is part of the issue, that although it's been promised, it actually hasn't been delivered. So the residents need to select that. We don't want the council or the developer to select our independent advisor. We want to be able to select that ourselves because of massive issues of conflict of interest. So I think it's really crucial we get that. I mean, residents have also reported concerns about, of course, the compulsory purchase orders, which have been a threat ever since the plans were announced and compulsory purchase orders were approved in principle. And the council documentation that's been posted to us has suggested that people who own their land and own their homes will be subject to a compulsory purchase order.
Mm-hmm.
And when we've had indicative conversations with the council and the developers, they've suggested kind of shared equity or ownership offers with the developer. So instead of fully owning our homes and our land, we'd have to share ownership or share equity with a new party. What can and would you commit to doing to represent homeowners if they are subjected to CPOs and offered new properties subject to shared deals, which would leave them significantly financially disadvantaged?
So I think the first thing is they need to be given all of the options, even ones we might personally disagree with, because it's important that everybody who has the options knows what they all are and that they have an informed choice around them. Again, independent advisor needed to help inform them. This goes back to lots of more public meetings and so on to really understand what the options are. So we might hate this option, but Mr. Bloggs may like it. So it's down to him and her, everybody else, to consider what is best for them. The shared equity sort of, I laughed when you mentioned that, because I know one of your colleagues had a meeting with, I think, was it about 5 or 6 councillors and council officers, and they said, oh, this would be an option for you. And when he pressed them if anybody would use that option, they all shook their heads and said, well, no, of course we wouldn't. So again, people should be aware of the option on the table because it's something they might be interested in. But if the council themselves aren't prepared to use that, it's not a big vote of confidence, is it? So I think one of the things that the principle I'd start with compulsory purchase orders is, I'd have to be blunt and say the word frightening. Not knowing if it's a 20-year scheme, and they've already told us now that the phases may go in any order. They're not wedded to 1 and then 2 following 1 and 3 following 2. So at what point might somebody come and knock on your door and say, well, we need to measure your house? Because so this affects people's mental health, the physical health, the well-being. Just living with that knowledge that it may come to that person is horrific and frightening. So as a principle to start with, it's wrong the way they're doing it, because they're just leaving people hanging. And then, of course, there's the sort of, when you get into it, there's the different issues. So some of the roads, you can walk to, these houses look beautiful. Some of them are 5-10 years old, some of them, and yet they may well be going in a CPO, which makes 0 sense financially, 0 sense environmentally. And we go back to the starting principle of, no, that's my home, and I want it, I bought it, and I should have it. So there's the principle at play, but also the factors of waste of money, waste of people have spent, we've talked to them, haven't we, on the doorstep. Some people have spent thousands of pounds adding things or renovating or whatever. So there's a lot of investment gone into them. So again, it's about pushing, it's about pressing, it's about consultation. It's not, again, something the MP can stop, or really the council. Well, it's not that the council can't stop it, it's the council get to choose in the first place, right? We've also got major issues around, I think there's something in Labour talking about maybe making sure people get a fair rate if their house is taken away. Well, fair, what does fair mean? Liberal Democrats believe that should actually be at a higher rate than is currently offered, to make sure people not only aren't disadvantaged, but in some cases may need to be recompensed higher in order to, compensate for the fact that they're losing out. And of course, as we know, a lot of these houses, even in the ones that they claim are affordable, 80% to some people, of course, is still unaffordable. In the middle of Ladywood, with new flats going up not far away from me for £250,000 for a one-bedroom flat. Yeah, it's a deep concern that whilst people might be offered something back, are they going to afford it, and are we going to see those people again? So yeah, principle and practice, I think, is an issue.
There is big concern about the amount of the compulsory purchase orders and what residents would be offered, especially given the fact that at the minute it seems to be kind of market value. But with market value, many residents would struggle to afford a place in the area.
Yeah.
And in other countries, they offer more than market value. When I speak to people about CPOs, they say, oh, you'll get a great deal. Maybe, you know, they'll pay you a lot to move. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So there are big concerns there.
Not with our current laws.
You mentioned affordable housing. The Birmingham Development Plan says that new projects should have a minimum of 35% affordable housing. And residents are concerned about the levels of affordable housing in the plans. What could you do as an MP to press the council to ensure that the developer includes that amount at least?
Yeah, so some of this comes back to law again, and doesn't it? And so the MPs, you mentioned earlier quite rightly about what does the MP do, what does the councillor do? One thing the MP has the power to do, the councillor doesn't, of course, is either create or amend laws in the country. Now, depending on the government, they could change some things overnight. Other things take a while to pass through Parliament, especially if it's new legislation. But certainly we need to be making sure, I think, see, the affordable homes is one thing. I think social homes is the big missing gap, isn't it? That if I remember rightly, it started at double digits and then it went down to 5 or 6%. And then one day the word social homes mysteriously was missing off of the website for the regeneration plan. So it seems to be social homes are no longer part of the plan, which is completely inexcusable. So
as of yesterday, sorry to
Mm.
interrupt you,
No.
as of yesterday, the word social reappeared in the residence charter, we heard.
Ah,
So that is good
okay.
news, but very weak plans at the
Right.
minute, and concerning it disappeared, as you noted.
Right. Well done, Ladywood Unite, I think, for getting that back in. But that has to be pressed and it has to be made, because what we see is claims made by developers. There's development along my street here, which is in Sherborne Street, and I know Ryland Street behind me. They even planned to put in some areas of trees, even planting a few of them. And by the time it got to the end of the development, we knew they weren't going to do it anyway. And they said, oh, well, it was only an ambition. So they put that in to try and make it look a bit green, knowing they were never going to build them. So we've got to be really careful in the charter, as well as the agreement, of maybes and possiblies and coulds and ifs and buts and candy and nuts. So I think we've got to be really careful on that. But there's lots of other things we need to be doing as well. So again, whether it's using existing laws or Lib Dems bringing new laws, brownfield first must be a starter. There are brownfield areas in Ladywood, and some places where we know of at least one business, they don't mind, it seems, if their place gets replaced. So, you know, if there's will and there's less contested views, then that seems to be obvious. I mean, just a few of the things, you know, well, we're in an election. We would personally, we would get rid of leaseholds, and we'd cap ground rents at a peppercorn rate as well, to make sure that the fees are as low as possible and that people have real control over their property, which in the long term would help if there's, you know, planning issues and CPOs that would come along. Yeah, so there's lots that we can do around laws. They might take a little while, but hey, if this is a 20-year plan and it's already been put by 6 months, there may well be time to do things.
Thank you. Speaking of national issues and national legislation and legislation for Parliament, residents have been reporting concerns about viability. The proportion of affordable housing that is proposed is subject to viability argument, so the developer making a 20% profit. We're wondering if you would be willing to challenge this element of planning law related to large projects like this one in Ladywood. Additionally, residents report concerns about adequate engagement and consultation. Legally, I've tried to challenge that, but my understanding is that although there are laws on the books to try and protect this, it's really difficult to get them enforced. So what would you do to challenge the lack of enforcement of laws that try and stop inadequate engagement and consultation about these kinds of plans?
Yeah, so I mean, we kind of touched on a few of those just now, but one of the things I think is important is that we perhaps the MP needs to remind the council that the first stage in planning law currently, Conservatives have been playing about with the law recently, but the first stage is that's about building a local plan with the residents, with the people in the area. And I double checked before we came on the call, and indeed the last local neighbourhood plan that the council has written with the councillors and the people in the area was in 2021-22. So that's now at least 18 months, 2 years out of date. I haven't actually seen that one enacted yet. So one of the key things is to go back to basics and make sure that the law that is already there, such as building the local neighbourhood plan, it must be with the councillors and it must be with the local people. Build that plan. That also does other things with infrastructure. So, places of worship, schools, shops, doctors, dentists, play areas, parks, all of these sorts of things should be considered part of infrastructure as well. Because the other worry I have about the regeneration is they'll throw up lots of boring square blocks. It seems to be red is the color of the day in Birmingham at the minute. Really uninspiring, really boring, and then they'll forget to build anything else around it, so that you have to go elsewhere, away from your community, to do anything. So yeah, the existing laws there already, but yes, I certainly would challenge the laws around the viability. If those 20% or whatever is still there, then it must come with significant strings. So we've already talked about biodiversity net gain, but again, it should come with strings like, right, you must per X thousand people build another GP surgery and build another nursery, or so it must come with significant strings as well.
Thank you. So I've got a couple of kind of general other questions before we finish up.
Sure.
So residents have reported difficulty accessing the current MP or the former MP. Many constituents who have contacted the current MP for help report receiving no reply. Similarly, with our local councillors, residents have reported concerns that our local councillors don't raise and voice our concerns. How would you handle, as MP, if elected, the kind of situation where you get just so many requests for help? And how would you tackle kind of relationships with our local councillors, where residents feel that they've been ignored and overlooked by them?
So I think as MP to start with, it's ideal with groups like yours, because you're a very diverse group of diverse backgrounds, but also diverse of there's renters, there's leaseholders, there's different people, and you're talking to the wider community. I know you go door knocking a lot, so you're kind of getting a picture, a snapshot of the voices. So groups like yours are ideal to talk to, because you're able to get a lot of opinions and a lot of views sort of funneled into one avenue, rather than having to try and meet 52 people in a week. Obviously, in fairness to Shabana, I know she has given a reply recently. I've read through it. I think some of it is a bit generic, but it's at least got there. Well done for securing the meeting. And it's making sure that, after the election, whoever wins, that, their door is continually knocked on and they are continually emailed and the office is phoned. And so I think the MP should be doing a lot more surgeries. Now, there are questions in this election around safety. I do agree that there's horrific amounts of misogyny going on, particular to obviously the female candidates are getting that abuse. I've publicly called it out. It's completely unacceptable at all in Birmingham or elsewhere, and it needs to be shouted down, including if it comes from candidates as well. So that is wrong, and safety is a concern. However, we do have things like online facilities now that could hold surgeries as well. So if that is a concern, which I accept it can be, then that must be looked into, doing more online events as well. In terms of the councillor side, obviously I'm running in this election. It is unlikely I'm going to win this time as an MP. However, obviously for the local councillor side, I find it a shame that certainly from this particular regeneration issue, but seemingly a long host of other issues, our current Labour councillors have long checked out. That there's no real engagement. They certainly don't seem to wish to talk to us. I know you've invited them, as you have the incumbent MP, to come to events, and you put a chair out for them with their name on, and they've not turned up. So they can't say they've not been invited. I, of course, am going for an even more direct route. I'm planning to try and unseat them. So I'm working towards 2026 when I'm working in Ladywood ward. And so I will still be in Ladywood, and I will still be working and visiting people after July the 5th. July the 5th doesn't end it for me. It may do for other candidates. I hope it doesn't, but it may even do for whoever the new MP is. It better not. But I will still be around and I'm not going anywhere. So I'm working towards 26. And then, hey, we've got another general election in 4 or 5 years' time. So who knows? I might be here all over again.
Thank you, Lee. We really need you. And thank you for the support that you've provided, prior to the election. And I look forward to continuing to work with you after the election. I know we've reached the half an hour mark, but I do have two more questions if
Please.
you're, yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you've been helpful with prior to the election was residents who've reported poor quality government properties. We've been in communication about people where we have run across them due to door knocking, where they live in government properties, but they're not getting the repairs that they need and they're living in appalling conditions. How can you support people in getting prompt repairs?
Well, first of all, if those people wish to contact me, then please do. My details, I think I'm happy for you. Obviously, you've got my email and so on to put
I'll
up.
post them, yeah.
I'll be relaunching my website soon where people can go in direct to do that. So we'll get that sent out. There'll be more door knocking from me as well. Happy to support LU, but also from perspective as a candidate. So door knocking leaflets, people will see my contact details. The great thing about it is because we've got a strong councillor base on the council, instead of having to go in as a resident, which we can try, I actually go directly through a colleague of mine, Councillor Mariam Jan, who's our deputy group leader. And she, oh gosh, she knows everybody in the council by first name. So I go straight to her and she goes straight to the department that's running it. So there's already a couple of people we've helped get referrals to. I believe that people have been out to try and see them. We've got another lady I know we need to help who's having some terrible issues, including with her health as well. So yeah, I'm happy to keep doing that, and people can refer to me, and then I'll be able to go right into the council rather than having to kind of just send them an email and hope for the best.
Thank you. And finally, you have said quite openly you're a bit behind in the polls at the minute. Your party, may be able to work very effectively nationally on some levels. You've talked about locally as well. Even if you are a bit behind in the polls, why do you think we should get your vote?
So I'm proud to be the Ladywood candidate that stands in Ladywood, checks notes. Oh, he lives in Ladywood as well. I don't believe any of the other candidates can say that. It's not the end of the world, but I think it's important to know your community and be part of it. Very much a liberal thing, be in the community rather than, talking to it. We're certainly growing our local councillor base, so we could have a balance of power at the next local election as well. But also, I mean, nationally, some of our polls might even put us in as what they call the official opposition. So we'll be challenging Labour nationally and locally, which I can assure you will be doing anyway. So and also the more that other people get the vote, there's obviously other people standing in the election in Ladywood. It does send a signal to the people who've had big majorities that their majority isn't always guaranteed. So it's good to show them there's a challenge. But I would challenge people, though, to go on to the websites, just Google Lib Dem manifesto, Tory manifesto, Labour manifesto. Have a look through, have a look at some of the things. The BBC website does a very good, here's the top 10 policies. What do you think? Have a read of them. I'm really proud that we put health and social care right at the heart of the manifesto. But have a read of the manifestos. They're not as scary as they may sound, and they'll give you a real flavour as to the kind of things that the parties are offering. So that's something I'd suggest people can have a look at.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, to talk to Ladywood Unite, for being part of Ladywood Unite, for being there before the election, and I look forward to more work with you after the election too.
Well, thanks for all you're doing, and yeah, thanks for your time tonight as well. That's great.
Thanks.